Here, I want to show you so you can go look at this yourself. Most of the medical research that I have up here too, by the way, you can Google. You don't have to go on a university search engine or pay money to PubMed or anything like that. You can Google most of this research if you really want to look into it. But most of what we found now, and a lot of this I found in the Journal of Immunology, the European version, I guess that's what the Asians is that they found that most people will react to some degree to glutens they can't break down. So the wheat we have now is very different than the wheat we had 50 years ago. And there's even a really brilliant study where they found, they took blood from airplane pilots in the 1940s. And they've been testing their blood against foods we have now and finding that the foods are more reactive, especially wheat. So when we get to the slide about GMOs and hybridization of foods, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's not really a good consumable food for anybody at this point. So if you have Jimmy Fallon, who do you see?
Jimmy Kimmel.
Jimmy Kimmel. Fallon?
Yeah.
JK.
Cows in the horse.
Very good.
It'll stay with you with JK.
He loves his pizza. But no matter what happens when he eats his pizza, he will complain. If he doesn't test positive to any of these markers we're talking about, he's got inflammation from wheat. If he has any kind of reaction to any of that wheat, then he's going to have more than that. He's going to develop some sort of pathology from it. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is for our celiac people here. Celiac disease in gastroenterology 2009. In the past 50 years, celiac disease went from 1 in 700 to 1 in 100. That's what I was saying. We know for a fact now our food has something to do with this. And it's not that we've got better markers for celiac disease. We've had good markers for celiac disease. They know now for a fact that most all autoimmune diseases are extraordinarily high and they're rising very fast. It's climbing faster than autism, climbing faster than diabetes. In fact, most of the diabetes, like I said, we find an autoimmune relationship to it. And then those with the greatest mortality were identified as having celiac disease or silent celiac. If you attend the autoimmune lecture that I'm going to have this Thursday night at 7, I talk about what silent autoimmunity is. That's you have an autoimmune disease and you have no symptoms. You know, here, I'm going to go out and have my pizza. I'm feeling pretty good. No problem here until you develop an autoimmune disorder. Wouldn't it be nice to know if you have something like that before you develop it? Because when you develop symptoms from an autoimmunity, you already have somewhere between 40 to 60% of the tissue destroyed. Does that make sense? So if it's your immune system, for instance, if you have the myelin sheath, you have already 40 to 50% of that myelin sheath is now calcified because of those symptoms you're starting to develop. Oh, my arm's just so weak now. I don't know what's going on. It would have been nice to know that 5 years before so it never happens. There's a test now that you can do to find that. A nice sensitive test. You can run one for every tissue of your body, or you can be very specific with that. And I'm going to share that with you in a little bit.
So it's also it's gluten is different, but it's probably also in terms of the correlation, all the things we're adding to our society that contribute to increased gut permeability, right? Like
Absolutely.
The NSAIDs and the stress and all the things that help.
Absolutely. And I'm going to talk about that. I won't forget about your question. We're going to go over that in just a second.
Yeah.
So the autoimmune review. Associated autoimmune antibodies are frequently positive in gluten, gliadin, and celiac. So again, gluten and gliadin, they're positive in their first degree relatives, meaning your family. If you test positive for gluten, how many of you test positive for gluten? Okay, so your family, right? That's why we introduced, look, we knew one person here, we got to check mom, or we got to check daughter, because somebody else in the family is bound to test for it, because there's a genetic predisposition to this as well. This spans from anti-integrin, anti-gastrointestinal, anti-nuclear, anti-cytoskeleton, anti-neurologic antibodies. So in other words, what this is saying, that's kind of confusing, is that the autoimmune antibodies are always positive to wheat. That makes sense? There's more than one study out here that talks about that. This is I just picked one right off the top of my head and slapped it on here so you can see it. This is just one. Eat wheat, you're more than likely to develop the antibodies if you have a problem with leaky gut constantly, or another problem with stress, or problems with glucose, or so forth. Next. So, what do we about food intolerances? Here we go. Here's answer your question. There's a difference between GMOs, hybridization, and the deamidation of our wheat, soy, and corn. The GMOs, to tell you the truth, and again, I don't like GMOs as much as anybody, but I got to tell you, with everything I've looked at least when they genetically modify, they're specifying where they're going to place all that DNA. And they can have a decent amount of control of what they're doing with it.
However, when they're making them so that the plant will survive rat poison, I don't think
that's exactly right. And what they've done,
they're targeting their modifications in the wrong spots.
Yeah.
And what they've done, though, that's happened more through hybridization than anything else. When they've crossbred plants, they make these superior grains. And again, they're grains that bugs don't eat because they can't digest them. If the bugs can't digest them, neither can we. And that's when you absorb these undigested
But also,
proteins
if they make the
that
plant
creates an
so you
immune
can poison
reactivity.
it.
And that's where you develop a food allergy. Now that happens most constantly with wheat. That's why we find wheat allergies more than anything. And then the deamidation is when they make the wheat water soluble when we eat processed foods. That makes them extremely reactive. So this could be the reason why we have more wheat allergies than anything else. It's a possibility. Which one is right? Good question. And it's probably not going to be proven.
None.
I have a lot of people that say, GMO and GMO is responsible, GMO foods are responsible for things like autism. And I think that's going a little far-fetched. Same thing with vaccinations. With Jenny McCarthy, I don't think she's right. I think vaccinations can be a trigger, but I don't think they're the cause.
Yeah. But there's other things that go on the exact same age. They get their first shots of heavy antibiotics often because of their...
well, that's going to be immunosuppressive, which will cause a leaky gut, and that brings you to the next one down here. So chronic leaky gut. You guys know what leaky gut is?
Yeah.
You do.
No? Okay, I know you guys do. Yes. Leaky gut is where your intestinal lining is no longer selectively permeable. It's now permeable to everything. So you're absorbing all the toxins, all the stuff that your body tries to reject and pass. When that occurs, you create a toxic environment in your gut, but your immune system inflames. Remember, 80% of the immune system's at the gut lining? It's called gut-associated lymphatic tissue. When that inflames constantly, it further breaks down the intestinal lining. Now, fortunately, we change our intestinal lining every 72 hours or so. But if you constantly have all these problems going, you have a lot of emotional stress, you have PTSD, where you have fluctuating blood sugar constantly, you're going to have a constant leaky gut, right? And that's going to promote more intolerances, more allergies, more problems with reoccurring inflammation or immune reactivity in the gut. Make sense?
Does that
make sense?
It can make you reactive to things you weren't reactive to before.
Absolutely. And
When I was really sick, I had been eating carrots for a few months because it's one of the few foods I could get down on a quick basis when I was out snacking. And all of a sudden, I would put a carrot in my mouth, I'd have to throw it up.
You're exactly what happened here. You had a leaky gut, you absorbed the proteins in the carrots, and now you had a problem.
And luckily, though, I got away from that, but yeah, for a number of years, I just couldn't do that.
Okay, so there's also chronic emotional stress, as I alluded to, and then wheat is stored in bins for 2 years or more, and there's a mycosis problem with funguses that they talk about as well. That's another theory, though, that I'm not sure if I will apply things to that.
Yeah.
So go to the next slide.
Well, our bodies were developed during a period of time, for the most part, where what was in front of us, we processed, we ate. 1, 2, 3. Now you've got the environment that we live in, where our apples are coming